I'm Chase.
And I'm Timothy.
And this is Customer Service.
Chase. How we doing, big dog?
Just fine.
I'm sitting here looking at the desk. We got a candle going. I got my Dwight bobblehead that I got 12 years ago.
We're dangerously approaching. In fact, when we finish this podcast, we are going to tear the podcast room down and rebuild and try to make it look like people live here.
We've got a couple shout out Jonty, our boy.
Yeah,
he sent
big
us some artwork. He sent you a past lives print.
Yep, just like the request we randomly made. I love it.
He sent me the Glow Part 2 by the Microphones on vinyl, and it comes with a couple little photos and inserts, and a lot of it is handwritten. I'll do next time we do a solo. I'll show it and just kind of show some
an unboxing.
Yeah, an unboxing, so to speak. I don't even own a record
Glow
player,
Part 2 unboxing.
Having it physically, I own it. It's physically here. That's cool to me.
Very nice.
I don't need to listen to it.
I don't
need it to be spun on a record player to have the value that it does to me. It's the physical media, and I own it, and it's here regardless if an MP3 disappears off the planet or not. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you got to be careful when you're doing all of your prepper stuff.
Yeah.
That's the prepping you do. You've got the Glow Part 2 on vinyl, no record player.
I have the Glow Part 2 on vinyl. I have
a lot of baked beans.
It's going to be a lot of Owen, and then the rest of it is I was trying to think of something funny, but
Bush's baked beans.
Oh, Bush's baked beans. Yeah, that and Future's discography on vinyl, but that'd be all about it. I need
that I could go into that room and look at that collection and go, oh, Chase is here.
Some Mike Kinsella, some Phil Evram, and then Future and then Thug. So anyway, we have a really stellar guest today. Speaking of music, we talk a little bit about our roots. He's also a fan of The Cause, Red House Painters, Sun Kill Moon. We talk about reunion tours, etc. That was fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, Coggins delivers on every level. You know what I mean? Because I think that what's great about a lot of the work he's done is that it can be super heady and serious and introspective, and it can also be very fun and light and nice. And I think all levels are what makes things great, and he's great. So this is a fun conversation that got to be fun and got to be a little bit serious about style and influence and things like that, and travel. And it was he's an awesome guy. We say it in the middle of it, but any interview we do where we never get to any of the questions that we actually wrote down is a fantastic interview, because it's like, man, it could have gone another 5 hours and I probably even got to my questions yet. So. This was really fun. I've admired David's work for a really long time now. If you don't know him, look him up. But he is he's a writer first and foremost, I think. He's just very interested in all things nice. You know what I mean? He's style, travel, fishing, that kind of leisure sport, things like that, design, things like this. He wrote great books like Men in Style, The Optimist, Men in Manners. That's just to name a few. He's written for Wall Street Journal, Esquire, GQ, Airmail. I mean, another one. You name it. He's written in. He's got a great newsletter called The Contender. It's all about travel, style, fishing, design, all the stuff we just talked about. He really, and he just got a really nice, seasoned but fresh perspective on all those things, and it was a pleasure talking to him. It was a real honor talking to him because I've admired his work for a long time, so this was really cool. I don't have anything else, man. I think the conversation speaks for itself. I think we should just
let's just hop right into it. What a pleasure.
Yeah, let's go. You're not a Zoom guy?
It always seems like a miracle to me. I'm ready for something bad to happen, and then I feel like my father when I have to. I'm sorry, I'm late. I had to upload new software. There's an update or something. Anyway,
I think there was a time when maybe age or something had to do with it, and now it does change so quickly that every single time I have to get on a Microsoft Teams meeting for something, I'm like, you guys got to give me a 15-minute buffer because it's going to update. It's not going to work. The video won't turn on. I got to go in and out 100 times.
Something you got to be on Chrome. I can't keep up with it. I just basically I want to know who's looking at me. Am I being recorded? And can I stare off into the middle distance and when I'm trying to be philosophical?
Yeah. Which way can I look to be philosophical? Where are you at, man? Are you in New York?
I'm in Wisconsin. I'm at
cool.
my family's cabin here. I drive out usually every summer and kind of set up shop. I assure you, when my great grandfather built this place, he was not on Zoom.
Yeah. He didn't
there
have to
used
do a podcast.
Be a party line when you wanted to call someone so other people could hear. But yeah, so I come here and work but also swim and do some fishing.
Yeah. Where in Wisconsin is it? We're Midwesterners. So
are you now? It's kind of near Eau Claire, Chippewa Falls area. Yeah. So it's about. I grew up in Minneapolis, so it's 2 hours east of Minneapolis. So, but it's by a small town, and then we're kind of on a very nice lake, deep, clean lake. I know some people are afraid of lakes. They think there's green, it's mysterious. This is not like that. This is a great spot.
A nice lake.
Yeah. I mean, I've been talking about this a lot. I love like a lake house situation. There's really nothing better.
I think a lake can go any body of water can go either way. You get that super crowded beach, that's no fun. But when there's a pretty quiet spot, and when you're in New York where it's hard for two people to even stand in a kitchen, it's nice to come here and grill and be in a proper place that has more than 3 pans.
Yeah. So what was it like? You said you're from Minneapolis?
Yeah, that's right.
What was it like growing up there?
It was a good life. I feel fondly toward it. My parents lived in in a nice neighborhood in a house filled with antiques and books, and I went to Montessori school, so it was all a bunch of schools that now I probably would not get into, but at that time it was sort of an eccentric life with artists and creative people, and it was really good. And then we traveled. We came to our cabin a lot here in Wisconsin, so that was part of our life. We traveled, we read. It was all a very good situation. I'm still close to my family.
Yeah, that I mean, like, look, there's a lot of things where like Midwestern stuff, like I'm glad to be out of, but then like you get out of it and you're like, there's a lot of things I miss about it.
Yeah, it is pretty endearing.
Yeah, I'm from Indiana. He's from Ohio. I lived in Chicago for a long time. Yeah. Like this is honestly, living in Colorado is the first time I really wasn't in the Midwest, living fairly permanently. So I do miss it a little bit now.
I think that sometimes you don't realize something's a certain way until you leave. Or you don't realize what you loved about it until you're gone. I mean, I've lived in New York far longer than I've lived in Minneapolis, but normally it happens to me where I'm like, can we just move this conversation along faster? Something that I just like, now that I live in New York, I'm just used for things moving quickly. And, you still try to be polite and all that, but it's a different, it's good to have a balance. It's good to, well, if you're lucky, like where you're from, but also like where you end up. And, if you live in New York, it's enough craziness that it's good to get out and kind of recalibrate before you start thinking that stuff's normal.
Did you have to have, because I feel like this is what I needed, did you have to have sort of like like when you were younger, did you want to leave like really badly? And then once you left, did you have to come back to terms with, I think I like going, you know what I mean? Like, because I feel like I've had to do the whole philosophical thing of changing my mind all the time.
It's a really good question, and it's a really good, in a way, process to go through. I mean, I left Minneapolis. I went to college in Maine, and then I lived in Tokyo for a year, which I know you guys are big Japan guys.
Oh yeah.
But I knew I was going to live in New York, and so I was very much looking forward to living in New York. And I think knowing that was there was good for me, and knowing I would hopefully be there for my early 20s, 30s. I didn't know I'd be there for 25 years or something. But then once I got to New York, and at that time you're young and you don't even have a cell phone, and you're behaving a certain way. As you get older, I miss certain things about being in Wisconsin at our cabin, and it was nice to kind of come back to that with a different perspective and realize maybe how lucky I'd been to spend summers here in my whole youth. And you kind of think that's normal, and then you realize maybe it's not normal, and it's good to have both of those things going on.
Yeah, it's a weird thing where I feel like as I've gotten older, it's like, you go through your younger life, and the whole time, both of us were really involved in like the hardcore DIY scene, and like, it's all like very cool and punk. And I think we were super lucky to have that outlet from, traditional, just suburban, kind of boring but comfortable life, for the most part. And then you like you leave and you kind of like start I don't know, it's like the rose tinted glasses thing has been complicated for me as because you realize like I think like a lot of my childhood was very like, you know, it feels like pretty, you know what I mean? It was like, so it felt like looking at film photos, and you don't like get that as much anymore. And then now I kind of like seek it out. So I feel like I'm kind of seeking out this thing that like I at the time just wasn't appreciating. So it's tricky.
It's probably something about how when you don't have a choice over something, or when you opt into something, and if you even if it's the same thing, right? And if you opt into it, it's like, I don't know, Tolstoy or someone said, if you're sitting comfortably on the floor, but then someone tells you can't move, then all of a sudden you're very uncomfortable or something. And if you're in Minneapolis or Indiana, and you I mean, there are a lot of great things about Minneapolis. Like it was sort of just for me the right size, where like there were really good museums and culture, and First Avenue, and I could go to concerts, and there were independent, you know, bookstores and record stores, but it was still small enough that it felt kind of intimate and safe, at least back then. And you know, then you want something bigger, you know, and then you go there, and I was, you know, when I got to New York, I was obsessed with whatever, Mercury Lounge and 1,000 other things, dive bars and walking around and just the grid, being on the grid. Mm-hmm. And then you get older, and at some point you're like, God, I don't know if I can go to a concert and stand up the whole time. Or I really need to know if it's like Yo La Tengo, Hanukkah show. I'd be like, when are they going on? Like, I'm not standing there for 2 hours. Well, at least at Yo La Tengo, I'm not the oldest person there. If it's a Mercury Lounge, I'm sort of standing in the back with, you know, with the bouncer or something.
Yep. We spend a lot of time when we go to shows now, because we both like to go to shows, but we're also like in that getting older camp, and you start to go, okay, I think that if we show up at if we go to dinner first and we don't leave until this point, we'll get there right when they go on. Yeah. And then inevitably you get there and you're like, fuck, we fucked it up. There's 2 openers.
No, it's crazy. Yeah, you're having the decaf espresso and getting the check, trying to exactly figure it out. But it's so crazy now. So now I'm sort of embarrassed. Like the shows I'm seeing are like reunion tours of my favorite bands, and you're paying a fortune to see The Cure or Depeche Mode or something. Mm-hmm. But it's like, you can look up online and see, you know, the set list from the entire tour and the time they went on, and then I'm like, do I want to get in the mood for these songs, or do I want to not know? And I'm like, I have to kind of balance myself, like, what are Afghan Wigs playing on this tour, or what's Morrissey playing? And but then I'm like, wait, no, I want to be surprised, or no, I just can't have, it's like a spoiler alert waiting for you. It's very hard for me to limit the information I allow myself to have.
Where do you rate it? How many reunion tours have you done? Because I've had this issue before where I went and saw Youth of Today, and listen, love them. I think what they did for the scene is incredible. And then you go see them and you're like, they're still ripping, but it's a different vibe. The Cure is a similar way, because you gets up there in the hockey jersey and suddenly you're like, that's a little different.
What you really don't need. So Cure is my absolute favorite band. Love them. Seen them straight through a million times. Would never stop seeing them. Usually I see them a couple times each tour. What you don't need with the Cure is like a high definition video of Paul Roberts. Like, there's a reason there's fog up there and the makeup and everything. Yeah. And sometimes I was like, let's just keep that camera at a nice distant perspective. We don't need I think what happens, I used to make fun of all these like boomers going to see Billy Joel and Elton John at Madison Square Garden in dad jeans. And I was like, this is totally embarrassing. That's $400 or whatever at that time, some huge amount of money. And then of course, when my bands came out, you know, and I'm getting into my 40s or 50s, and just, I'm like, oh wait, this is happening. I mean, the reunion tour comes for us all at some point. Yeah, I think what I said, and you can't help it. And what you honestly, my feeling is like, I just want to have the feeling when I can have it. And there aren't many bands. If Depeche Mode comes and they play Enjoy the Silence, I'm like, I'm just going to be very happy. Is it as good as it was 10 years ago when I saw them in Germany, or 20 years ago when I saw them in whatever, New York? Probably no, but you just have to like, I'm not comparing it to the best thing I've ever seen. I'm comparing it to nothing, and nothing. It's 90, you know, it's in the 90th percentile. Just going to enjoy it, because who knows when I'm going to have that feeling again. And yeah, like, it's sort of embarrassing to see old people in their goth or their one pair of black jeans, and that's kind of like got revved up for the show. But you know what? I'm doing it too. So I'm just like, gotta live through it, you know?
I'm on the other side. I think I like it. I like to see it's like, oh, now I can go. I know where the freaks are because I know what you used to be into, and I know what that was at that level. Right. So it's like you get to reinvite that in because you see so many people where it's like sometimes as you get older, like I go to like drop off my daughter somewhere. I'm looking at the parents. I'm like, what were you guys into prior to this? You know what I mean? Like what were you getting into before this? So it's nice to go to a concert like that and be like, all right, cool. I got to isolate some of the freaks tonight.
No, I like that. And there is something about this feeling of camaraderie that you can still have. I mean, this was every one of these bands that we fell in love with was before the internet. So you didn't have access. I mean, forget like, seeing the set list from the night before. You didn't know, you're looking in the back of the Village Voice or in my case, Twin Cities Reader about like what, concert, what's coming to First Avenue and you're going to buy tickets. It's, just seeing those ticket stubs from First Avenue makes me so nostalgic. And now, we can find everything. You can find The Cure playing the same song 20 different times. I mean, I've done it. God, at 2 a.m, I'm all like, what's my favorite version of Enjoy the Silence? And it's like this one from, whatever, Milan. And I do I always ask people who are older than you guys, like the fact that we didn't have the internet when we were growing up, especially if we're from the Middle West, not the, New York or something, that we had to work a little harder to find the things we wanted. And I think that probably is a good thing, like being able to not just type it into Google, but, seek stuff out. I think that's a good skill to have, whether it turns out to be vintage clothing. It serves you in other areas of your kind of creative or obsessive life.
Yeah.
Have you went to any of these shows? Like you said, you're trying to maybe tailor expectations, not look at the set list.
Yeah.
There's an artist I really love, Mark Kozelick of like Sun Kil Moon.
Of course.
Okay, so
huge sad guy vibes. Love it.
Oh, and he's from Ohio. It can't
he's
be more my thing. You know what I mean?
He's the sad guy president of Ohio.
He's my avatar on
your
like
heart
our
out
Slack
national
and stuff.
Yeah, national get in line, buddy.
Yeah.
But so and similar to you, it's like, wow, I've got my favorite versions of him playing Allison live on this tour or what have you. And there's the specific recordings I know and love. And I remember he was probably 2019, 2018, he was touring the U.S. and I had some friends from Cleveland who were like, ooh, and I was living in Colorado at the time. They're like, ooh, went and saw and it was a rough sight, man. He got drunk and talked shit to the crowd for the whole time. And it's like, part of me was like, did I miss that experience though? Like, because there's songs I would have loved, but like, would it also not be interesting to see a drunk Mark Koz on stage talking shit? So it can be tough when you see your heroes and they're a little bit past the due date, and it's not even a judgment of them. It's just how like certain rock stars. And speaking of Ohio, so like a big Afghan Wigs fan, but like Greg Dooley, like that guy's like not. If you look at like the before photos, he's like obviously like handsome and dashing and wearing this like crazy fur overcoat or whatever, fake fur overcoat. And now you see him, it's a little bit time has caught up with him. The hard living's caught up with him, and sometimes that can be a tough one. Like even like New Order, it depends where you are. Like the toughest one for me where I was so excited to see Ride when they did a reunion and those guys hated each other, and they got back together and they played in Terminal 5, probably the worst place in New York, and they still hate each other. And it was really rough. Like you just like one guy sang, then the other guy came and sang, and like no chemistry between them. And there was just like, I don't know if it is a money grab or whatever, and you would never begrudge anyone, but that one where you're like, sometimes you just miss the time, and I kind of like the fact that you can miss the time. It seems like we're so used to thinking we can get everything whenever we want it, or I deserve to be able to download this movie. Why can't I stream it? And there's like, I don't know, wait until it comes to film form. 3 years. It's okay. The Third Man will come up and you see it then. And it's like, it's okay to wait. It'd probably be better. The fact that I have to stop myself from watching these things I love so much because I get, it's not a sugar high, but you think you can just like, I'm in the mood to see The Wire, the Avon and Stringer Bell or whatever. I'm going to just watch the best episode right now. I mean, that didn't even happen when the show came out. You couldn't do that. Yeah.
We talk about that a lot with actually my friends and I growing up were really into movies, but we were like young for being into movies, and it's complicated because like he had a stepbrother that was much older, and he would get this stuff, and then occasionally, so it would float into the house when he was home from college, and I'd be like, he's got the DVD collection, which was in a binder, and it would be like, my friend would go through it secretly when he wasn't around, and then call me and be like, "Here's what he's got," and I'd be like, "I'm coming over right fucking now," because it was couldn't get it otherwise, because it was it was our movie, so we were too young, couldn't get those, so we couldn't do it in Blockbuster. We used to try to call Blockbuster on the phone, and then tell them to like, we'd pretend that we were like
the assistant
our mom or our mom's assistant. The idea that either mom's had an assistant. But
why is the mom getting Basic Instincts and Primal Fear? They're like, no,
can you please leave those at the desk? We'll pick them up. we'll pay it. I'm going to send my son.
But that was like, I mean, thinking about like, first of all, I think there's a good education about, in the old sense, where it's like, this is just what Turner Classic Movies is playing on Sunday night at 8 when they usually played a good one, or like public television that would play like a black and white movie Sunday night. And you're just like, that's the one you're going to watch. You know, you're not, and then maybe it turned out you'd be surprised and loved it. Maybe this wasn't for you, but that sometimes you got to just, it would be like listening to old college radio. And that's how, you know, they're doing the programming for you. And if you don't like the song, you can't skip to the next one. You have to sort of sit through, and maybe it grows on you or maybe it doesn't. But I think we're so algorithmic now that we don't get surprised in that way anymore. So whether it's your friend's brother back from college and these are the movies he has, or it's just like, this is what's on the Criterion channel, but imagine it was only one thing. Like it's probably good to have someone else program things every now and then, a person, not something that, you know, trusts your, you know, taste based on some computer.
It's like difficult because like the anticipation is like 90% of anything in my mind. It's like everything that I've gotten in life as I've gotten older. The thing that sucks about it as you get older is you can get all the stuff that you didn't have. You know what I mean? That's like that's the greatest thing about getting older in my mind, is that now if I'm like, I want that, even though it's frivolous, I can just do it. You know, this has been my big success in life.
I like it.
The problem though is that there's no build up to it. You don't have to wait forever, you know, because my wife always like, just buy the damn thing, quit talking about it, I don't want to hear about it, because she's not interested in guitars or guitar pedals. But like, I have to, you know, that's the build up is all of it, because the time you get it, it's like, well, now it's in a room and I don't care about it anymore, you know what I mean? Like I miss that.
Well, if I don't have, that's why they created the eBay wish list. I mean, I look at this thing for a month and I like get excited about it, and usually no one buys it because it's ridiculous anyway. And then finally I'm like, I'm pulling the trigger, but the month of just looking at it every day is like definitely part of the process. If it just like arrived at the house, like I almost forgot I ordered it, which sounds bad, but you know, we're in the bargain bin part of eBay, so it's not like it's a major thing. But I enjoy I used to, when I was, you know, in New York, and I could only buy one thing, you know, each season, and I would like go to Bergdorf Goodman or Barney's, and I would go, or the Ralph Lauren mansion, and I would like go 3 times before I would buy it to see if the acquisitive desire had worn off by the 3rd time, because I was only going to buy, you know, one shirt or one whatever. And usually like you get so excited the first time, you're like, I'm going with it. And then by the 3rd time, it almost feels like you own it already, because it's so familiar to you, you know where it is in the store, you've seen it, it's been a few weeks, and you're like, I can live without that. And that's sort of a good lesson to remember, because most of the time after 2 weeks, you're going to be fine anyway.
Oh, 100%, 100%.
I've been trying to, like, with every business I've worked in retail, I've been trying to recreate exactly what you just described that has gone away from retail, which sucks. That, like, you used to go into a place and get so hyped, and it was the only place you could see it, and then you'd know the staff, and you'd talk to them about it a million times, and half the time you weren't going to buy it, but you just wanted someone to be like, they know what, we like the same weird thing together, and then I can go there and talk to them about that thing for as much as I want to, and they will not get bored because they think I'm going to buy it, even though I'm not. And then you could just keep that going for, and like that's what when we set up this, it was like all about like, how do we like, I don't want anyone to, if we could create the same thing but take away the feeling of like old Barney's where they made you feel bad about,
of course,
because they knew you didn't have the money.
Right, and, absolutely.
If we could recreate that, that's the best part about clothes to me, is like all of that. Like I know everyone touts like community and everything like that. I don't think everyone stands on it like we do, but like it's like that's the fun part about it, is the bullshitting about it, is the talking about it, is the obsessing over it. Like that's the best part about clothing, period. Then the experiment, everything after that is, and finding your style is good. But for me, it's the first part's the best part.
I mean, I think there's some idea or in certain quarters are like, men don't like to shop. Well, what they don't like is feeling pressure when they go into a store. I mean, nobody does, but men particularly don't. And some of them can overlook that. because they really want the thing. But what they really want to do is go into a place like Drake's or Sid Mashburn, or it sounds like your place, where you feel like you can talk to the people. Maybe you're curious what music they're listening to. You want to see how they're dressing themselves. You're like, whoa, what's that? And that's a cool way to do it. And when someone creates that feeling, or a place creates that feeling, then a lot of good things can happen. But most places don't do that for a variety of sort of sad reasons, and it's even more tragic that it's hard to find those places, or they're in like Japan or someplace where they're just going to kind of leave you alone, or if you speak a few words of Japanese you can kind of connect. But
I mean, it also is weirdly like it's the best because like, for example, my brother-in-law went to live in Japan. He teaches there, and so he's there for the next little while, and I had hooked him up with some like, you know, like 990s and shit like this. He wanted some basic but cool clothes, and I gave him some stuff, and he said, dude, every sixth person stops me and is like, where'd you get those? How'd you get those? Those are hard to get, blah blah blah. And he's like, it's in this like weird way that he's like connected with like Japanese people, like, because he's like, I didn't have anything, I don't know how to broach them on just a random subject, but now we're on the same page suddenly, like that quick, because only two freaks are going to know about caring about a V4 or whatever.
It's a code, and I think sometimes, I mean, I'm not as dialed in on those types of things. I just go for the overall like tailoring vibe typically, but I love, like, you can really, in Japan, because people believe in that stuff, and they really, it's part of their, you know, kind of creative identity and public like way of self-expression. In a place where everybody's the same height with the same color hair, then you're making some decisions about what color knit tie to wear, and it's going to be freaking cool. The guys who work at Beams Plus F or whatever, and those guys are some of the best dressed guys in the world.
It's what I like about Japan and how they like relate to fashion as opposed to here is they're not so strict on the categories. I've hated to see a lot of like menswear get so pigeonholed into like, I like streetwear, or I like fashion, or I like, you know, made in US, or, you know, what you name it, tailoring, whatever it is. And those feel all like we hang out in those groups together and don't interact with the other ones. Whereas Japan feels like we all like stuff the same way, like we do too here. Yeah. But it all feels like interchangeable, and then it kind of like inspires itself because of that, and I like that a lot.
Well, it's an interesting thought, because there is a kind of American guy thing to define yourself as like, I like this band or genre of music, right? I identify with that, and then I identify with whatever the clothing company is that's part of your thing, or even if. But there's something else to be said about, I like a lot of different, or beer, or just something where you're kind of, you're affiliated with something, or a type of car or watch, and that you're in that category, and someone else is like, no, I like Kozlik, and I also like Mozart, and you're like, whoa, slow down, buddy, you can't go to the opera and Red House Painters in the same week. It's like probably a good thing to do that. And if you saw someone else who was at both of those places, that's like someone you can, talk to. That's like the person who's got a good connection.
Well, it's what's tricky is like that eclecticism is sort of, in my opinion, what makes people, number one, well-rounded, but number two, one informs the other. Like, I don't understand why people can't like Billy Madison and Yee Yee in the same, like both those things, they're different things, but they're both important culturally. They just are, so it's like understanding them only makes you like things more, which is my entire philosophy on life, is how crazy can I go into something?
I think you're getting towards the confidence in your own taste, which is the last frontier, really. And I think some people, like, when you know what you like, you kind of come to I hope, some sort of like peacefulness, that you're also not threatened by what you don't like. Because I'm pretty narrow in a lot of my interests, but I also understand that I'm kind of, I'm the end of a lot of losing battles, and that's okay. But I think when someone knows, I don't like the guy who only will drink the fanciest whiskey or whatever. Like, sometimes you don't need that. Or I like a person who can just drink a house red in Florence. It's like perfectly great in the right situation. And Japan gets that too. Like, that the soba that you get in Kyoto Station is great. And, it's like the best version of that thing that they can do, and they would never do it less than as good as that version can be. Of course, then you can go to the fancy place and wait in line and sit there and pay 5 times more. But I like that about Japan, because every level of everything is going to be as good as they can make it.
It's like I just know that all humans are a lot more dimensional than sometimes like we like make ourselves out to be, if that makes sense. Like it's like you're saying, like I know I know exactly what you're talking about. You're talking to two guys who used to be into hardcore music, which is basically like, I will define everything about myself by this one thing, and it's how I will eat, drink, talk, hang out with it, and and then
I'll be a barber. I'll work at UPS.
Yes, yeah. There's a linear, but the trouble with that is it's like I don't earnestly believe that's how anybody actually is, unless it's truly you're really not that interested. And all of the things like you're talking about, Japan's such a good example of it, and like you said, there's like high or low does not matter. It's completely about, because I would say that like I love food and fine dining when you experience it. Like there's plenty of places in Chicago I went to where you have these like life-changing experiences, and that's great. But if you had to do that every single day, it wouldn't be special. It wouldn't be interesting, and you'd throw it out, and it wouldn't be any just everything would feel ugh. And you're in Wisconsin. I mean, like there's nothing cooler in a dining experience than like a supper club or something. Like that's like the coolest
fish fry.
Yeah, you just feel so comfortable and good, but also is kind of feigning as fancy, and that's like its own experience. And like it's it's like you miss out on so much by like trying to define.
Do you think that's a really interesting point? And I wonder, do you think that it has to do with like self-presentation on the internet? So if you've got let's just say you're the type of person who posts photos of yourself, which is very exhausting for me, but you want to present something about yourself that's like a coherent picture. So you're understood. This is my band. This is my, basketball player or whatever it is. And this is who I am. And we're constantly doing that in Instagram or whatever the medium is. And I wonder if that's that kind of, at first it's like, oh, this is a nice way of self-expression. But in another, maybe people are trying to be consistent within that thing. And it's got to fit, a unified theory of who you are that just young men can't. It takes them a while to overcome that, right? To have the confidence to like different things, or to admit that maybe they're less into Game of Thrones and more into the Real Housewives, or who knows what it is.
That's accurate of me personally.
But it's also fun. I mean, the hardcore, that's a funny, it's like, I never was into hardcore, but it seems like so many people I like, and actually people who host podcasts, there's a lot of interesting people started there. I wonder if that's an interesting, I'm sure you guys have ideas about that. But
I think that it's just like, I also felt this way about if you start going down the line of guys that were into like hardcore into like comic books. And I don't mean like comic book movies and all that bullshit, which is great if you're into that. But like, it's more like the hardcore stuff. It's because of like the way you get into things, I think is really like, it's like how voracious, like how crazy are you going to be about collecting it and understanding it, and how, like, I think Chase and I are both people who get excited when we find a rabbit hole. Like, oh my God, this is going to be like weeks of this. And this is exactly what I want, like, because it's like the obsessing over things is what I enjoy doing. It's like general research, basically. It's just for research for nothing. But I think hardcore has that. It has a community built around it. Fashion has a community built around it. Comic books have a community built around it. Whatever you want to name here. I think they tend to be attracted to the same types of things because it's like the way you interact with it, like through a community or through like, like hardcore is very... its own community is abrasive in that you have to follow all these made up rules, and then you have to enforce said rules also because it's very self-policing, and like it's annoying. It's totally annoying. But you're also like, when you're in it, you're like, I love this. I love knowing the rules. I love enforcing them. I love knowing what they are. I love knowing there's all this like nuance to it. Same thing with fashion. Like, I think at some point, as people go through like their arc of getting into clothes and style, at some point you go, now I know enough to start flipping things around, and no one's going to notice except for me and a handful of my fashion friends, and that's perfectly okay with me. And I think a lot of those things that we mentioned, like that's how you interact with them. Like the highest point is like the most self-actualized, and like in any of those things. And I think that's cool. I don't know. It's silly. It's all silly, but I don't know. I like people that are kind of intense, and I think I'm drawn to things that are, the people that are involved or interested are kind of too intense.
And David, you even said earlier too, like being from the Midwest, you had to be kind of intentional about how you took in the information. And I think in particular, hardcore was that way. It was passing around zip files to your friends and being like, oh, my buddy went on tour, and when he was in this city, he met a guy that used to be in this band, and he actually gave me a recording from a demo that isn't on the internet. And like that was what really got me excited. Similar to the, like, again, with the knowing I like the version of this song live in this recording in this city. I mean, like a Grateful Dead thing. It's the same
fashion's
situation.
The same shit though. You want to know about, like, well, this is like the new, this is interesting, this is going on somewhere else. That's why people got obsessed with Japan at some point, I think, to a certain degree, is they were doing it at a crazy level. And it was also like, I mean, I'm sure you'll understand, going from like made in US all the way to made in Japan, that felt like, at a time, you would have felt like no one was buying anything in Japan. Like, that's crazy. And then now all of a sudden all those guys are crazy interested in that shit. And it's just the way they liked it. And then it's cool to be like, they did it this way, and it's even crazier than these jeans. And like, that's all it is. It's just like one-upping.
Yeah, I mean, there is something wonderful, that feeling when you fall down, where you trust yourself to just go with something and learn more about this band. Or even I just found this woman, English author, who's dead, and wrote kind of a famous book in the 80s. And I was like, and my friend gave it to me just the way you're talking about, and I waited a while to read it. Her name's Isabel Colgate, and I read this book. I'm like, this is the best short novel. It's so good. So then you like, am I gonna just, and I don't read that many novels anymore. I have other stuff I've got to read for work and other things. And I was just like, then I read another one. Then I'm like reading about her life. She's very fascinating, lived in this like castle from the 1300s. Then I read another one. I'm like, oh my God, nothing makes, and I'm like talking to a few people about this, kind of, you know, they're starting to read it. The woman at Three Lives bookstore in New York, she's telling me about a different book. Now I'm like, they're selling it in the, you know, staff pick section. And it's like this fun way of kind of it's a little handheld, the way you're talking about, like zip file to friend, you know, to friend, my friend knew that someone in this band, but also you can order the book immediately on, you know, eBay or whatever. So the technology helps it as well. And that's still a wonderful thing when you like let yourself kind of go there, especially when no one else is really going, or you're just the only other people doing it are your friends too.
Yeah. I mean, I think that like even you just describing that is, I don't even know what she wrote or what type of, but I'm already like, that sounds great.
She lived in a castle?
Super
all right,
cool.
Count me in.
Yeah, when it's also like, I think there's like, there has to be something that like you're describing as like, there's an advocacy that you have to do. Like same thing for those bands, same things for these brands that we work with and stuff. Like you've got to be the one that tells the story and gets people hyped and gets more people into it. And that's equally as exciting as like having a piece from it or reading that book, and because you could obviously keep that to yourself and it could be something special for you. And I could have found any given number of Japanese brands and like, you know, I saw this in Japan, I'm not going to tell any of my friends this is my shit, I'm not going to tell them what it is, and that could feel special. But like I think that people that are into this kind of thing like can't keep your mouth closed. You're like, hell yeah, I can't wait to tell my friends about how fucking sick this is, and they got to get into it, and then that it just makes it more fun. Like, you know what, maybe we've hit on something that like it's the adding people to something that gets me excited. Like, how many people could we get also into this, and then it'll be more fun because there's more people involved.
That's a really good point. I think at some stage in your career, you say like, if you're going to write for other people or have a podcast or have a store, something that like connects with an audience or public, you're changing your mission a little bit. I mean, I used to be. I think I'm embarrassed to say, like, bought some Nikes in Japan, and then when I was 21 years old, and I knew like you couldn't get them here, and I, you know, and like even the cell phone I got there was definitely not, because here they had flip phones. This was just small, and I like felt this sort of ridiculous superiority. Only a 22-year-old just back from their first trip to Japan is like, you know, and like obviously that's embarrassing. But now but you kind of grow out of that, and you're like, okay, wait a minute. I don't define myself as something that someone else can have, though every now and then it's nice to have a sample for sure. That was never made. But I do think it's like you want to bring people towards this. It's kind of a broader approach. It isn't just like read this author, buy this brand. It's like maybe it's a way of looking at the world that the community will be better if more people share that view, even if the way it expresses itself is different. It doesn't just mean maybe if someone was checking out these Japanese brands, it changes them in some other way, not just if they buy it or not, but they start to get into whatever Japanese magazines and other crazy stuff. And then that can be a really wonderful thing. I think one reason I love going to Tokyo even now is like, I'm still disoriented there, and I have to just trust. I always say, like, if in Japan, if something looks good, it is good. Yeah. And like when normally I'd be like, wait a minute, is this the right, whatever, pizza shop. I'm gonna Zoom or Google and study and all these things. It's like, just go in, man. Like if it's there, like it's gonna be so good. And I like that feeling when I'm there of kind of being like just following whatever is in front of me and looks good. For once, I still do crazy research before I go, but then also I let myself kind of discover what's in front of me or just enjoy what's in front of me. And that doesn't happen that often, at least for me.
Oh yeah, hardly at all. Timothy and I, we've been twice in the last year, and we travel well because we're both the way you're talking, which is like, listen, we have a couple spots that would be awesome if we could get to, and we'd love to hit them because that's what's been recommended. But also, we acknowledge you're not going to do it all. You can't do it all. We could go 8 times before the end of the year.
And do it 8 different ways.
And still not even scratch the surface. So there is a freedom, especially in Japan, where you're just like, no, it's all going to be good. It's all going to be different than what we are experiencing back home. So let's just go for it. It doesn't have to be the one that is written about or.
Right, David, you travel out. You have to understand. Like it's like a thing where it's like you can research, and I love to do it. I've told you this is like I love looking things up. But for the most part, we started being like, let's just look up whatever like a cool coffee shop is. That means it'll be a cool neighborhood, and then we'll grab a cup of coffee. That buys us time to like mill around, and then by that time you'll find other cool things, or you'll have talked to someone that puts you onto something, and then you just sort of like experience and let it happen to you, rather than I'm gonna go impose my shit on Japan.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Is it just sort of then I feel like you end up with more like memorable stuff.
Well, and people are doing it for the internet at that point too.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's like proving that you had the ramen at the spot that some chef recommended it.
Exactly.
It's hard to explain to people who haven't gone, which I realize is a terrible way to start any story, but it's just like there's so much, like you just can't believe there's a store that's like in a space this small or shaped like this or this idiosyncratic. Or I remember it was getting dark there one time and I just saw this small store, and I don't even remember, in Harajuku or something, and there was just what they sold were used military boots and Red Wings, carefully restored, some ceramics on a shelf, and then there was just a rack of white shirts. So I think the shirts were new, maybe, and there was one man in there. The thing is small, like the size of the train car and a half the train car. And I was like, I really have to go in here. I don't need any of those things that he's selling. But I was like, I know it's his store. There's just no other way. And I want to hear what music is playing in the store. Because, of course, I know he's chosen it. I know it's going to be good. And I just want and it was getting dark. Stores lit up. And I see the man in there. And I'm like, I really love this place. And I just opened the door. And, of course, it was like probably Bill Evans or some sort of like jazz piano. And I was just like, yeah, man, this is so great. Like, there's no way this place makes money. He probably does something else. He loves everything in there. And I was like, this is so, I don't know if it's pure or maybe it's constructed. I don't know. But I was like, that feeling is something that I love. And I don't get a lot of that anywhere else.
No, I mean, I think that it's we're a business, and we have to respect that we're a business, and we were really lucky that we've been able to do what we've done and accomplish what we have, given that we haven't really compromised on wanting to do a lot of the stuff that I would have wanted to do when I was 16 and to set this up. And I think that Japan is a place that's full of that. Where it's like, I don't know what it is, but like it doesn't get like shot. Like it's like ideas don't get shot down. We went to this great cassette. All they do is sell cassettes, and I'm talking like cassette tapes. That's it. It's a whole place called Waltz, and it was one of the best like retail experiences that we had in Japan. We went to all these great like clothing stores, but this was so dedicated to one type of media, so well merchandised. The store was beautiful.
The music that was playing was awesome.
Yeah, it was like this like weird kind of like analog dance music, but very analog, like almost ambient. And it was from Chicago, where I'd lived for like 13 years, and I wasn't gonna find that on my own, and I find it through there. And they were so cool without being like dicks, and it was like man, this whole presentation is so good that this was like the best experience I had while I was there.
I love it.
I think it's like that's the kind of stuff like that would never exist here. It just wouldn't, and you wouldn't stumble upon it in the same ways, and
Well, even when you find a place that's, I mean, I always like go crazy about Japan at some point, and I realized we were probably going to do it too, and I'm contributing to it. But it's like, even when a store is like owned by a chain that owns a bunch of different stores with different names but the same ownership, like if you just showed someone one of those, you would never guess that it was not an independent store. Like the design, they'll be like, we're selling like some label that's indigo dyed, whatever. But then there's just like, we also have a rack of like used army jackets that just has nothing to do with it. We also selling like Tibetan rugs that are shaped like tigers. Or we're like, wait, what? This is not one person. This is like they went to a boardroom and pitched this, and this is acceptable. And you're just like, this is insane. Like just how stuff gets done. And that's why when you said no idea gets shot down, is like, that's so good. Like they trust people. Because the consumer is the most educated in the world by a factor of 100 probably, then they know that they're going to take the time to understand why the rain jacket's better, why this thing is this way, who did it, and what was the motivation behind it. And it's just so liberating when you see these things that would never, would just never happen in New York or Los Angeles for the most part.
The reason it comes up, and I have to be careful how I talk because we have like an upcoming collaboration with a brand in Japan that's big. People know them. And when we started working with them, what sticks out to me the most is that in any time I'm in a meeting like that this is all I've ever done is this sort of work. And you go into a meeting, anything with the U.S., and you start pitching something, and you immediately know that you need to be on guard for all of the, well, we can't do it because of this, or we can't. Right. In Japan, they were just like, cool. Sick. Yeah, we can do that. Yep. Let's start. We'll start drawing it right now. And we're like, it's like a couple of them were like, I don't want to say out there, but they were a little bit more like non-traditional. I was thinking like, I don't know if we'd be able to do that. I don't know. It was just like, yes, cool, love that idea. And I was like, this is the weirdest meeting I've ever been in because of you guys are just like down for everything.
You got to ratchet up the craziness of your ideas if you know they're going to get approved. Or it's the joke that when you write something and show it to the editor and they're going to take out the most offensive or the most provocative joke or whatever, so you do one doubly provocative and then you sneak the one you really want in below it. Right. And now it's like you don't even have to do that. You're just like, wait, why did we give them our mild agenda when we could
you just go straight there.
Exactly. It doesn't just have to be khaki or blue.
So we don't have to stay here forever, but like how old were you when you first went to Japan?
When I graduated from college, I was 21, and I taught English like your friend did, and which is a somewhat absurd thing to do. I mean, it's a fine thing to do, but that wasn't really why I was there. I just wanted to like have a big feeling, and it was the era.
What a good way of putting it. I feel like that's half of my life is just wanting to have a big feeling.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah,
and that one at that time, it's funny. It was they. So that's probably 97 to 98. And they, like the first Starbucks opened there, which is funny now because there's about 1,000. And Tower Records was still a huge deal there because there's a whole floor of English books and magazines, and you could go when there were listening stations, and this was before like you couldn't be reached, like you couldn't. I mean, you'd have to sit down at a computer to email someone, and I think it was the era of the Sony mini disc player, which was going to revolutionize everything because you could record on it if you remember.
Very expensive to buy now.
Well, so now, so I got one, and I didn't quite appreciate that the only mini discs that were available were like from Sony or I think EMI they own. So it was like Pearl Jam. It was just like the Verve. It was like I bought 5 mini discs, and then I could record only versions of those 5 things. So it obviously didn't really take off. But it was great. I mean, it was a very, very different time to travel. I went there with like 2 guidebooks and like 36 hours in Osaka, or cut out from the New York Times. Like I actually brought newspapers, travel sections with me, and now you can research 1,000 things. But it was a much more handheld experience, and it was incredible. It changed my life in many different ways. And I think going there as I'd traveled before in Europe a lot, but never been to Asia, and to go there and to just kind of give over to that was a big thing for me. And I think wherever you do that in your life, I think especially if you're young, to have that chance to do something like that is pretty good, because it makes you kind of, not toughens you up, but it conditions you to do something that to take yourself out of the obvious way. And if it turns out you love Japan, which I knew I would, it makes it a thing you can have in your life, and it's one of the greatest things I have had in my life.
Were you already into like style and fashion and stuff at that point, or did that come later?
I was pretty particular about these things. I was always cared a lot about clothes, and I was always pretty formal. when I was 21 and 2 there, I was going to Barney's and Paul Smith, and I couldn't afford a lot of that stuff. Actually, I think we kind of made a pretty good salary. I spent it all on clothes. We had to wear a coat and tie, which was good for me because I was into stuff like that. So I was like going through Barney's. I think there was like a lot of Xenia at that time. And I was just, and Paul Smith has always had a very specific relationship to Japan. As you know, they have just different collections there and different, more aggressive design and stuff. And I've always been interested in Paul Smith. My dad took me to Paul Smith when I was in high school at the old store on Fifth Avenue and 16th Street in Manhattan, one of the great stores ever.
Oh yeah.
And I had never seen that type of, they're selling plastic colored toothbrushes, and then there's, tailoring, and then there are kind of posters of boxers, and that world mixed together really got me excited. And I was, and a little kind of playfulness that now is very obvious. But at that time, if there was like buttons that had, contrast stitching or something I would never care about now. But at that time, one little thing was orange that you wouldn't have thought. And I got very excited about that. I was, 17 or something. But when I got to Japan, it was a chance to, when you have a little bit of money and you're not saving any of it or whatever, you're living that like 22-year-old life. Like it was, and I had a Sumitomo bank card, and you're paying cash with everything. And I still have that card somewhere that has my name and like Katagana, David Coggins, it said. And I learned a lot about food. I went to the same, next to the school. God, some of the people I taught with were like going to McDonald's. I was like, what we're here to experience this culture, and you're having a cheeseburger or something. But I went to this family restaurant every day, and I sat at the counter and I ate a bunch of things on the menu, off the menu, and that was a really good education too. And I was into the whole thing big time. And then went to New York after a year, and I traveled a lot around there. And then sort of in the last maybe 10 years or so for work and other things, I've gone back every year, a couple times a year until COVID. And it's a great thing to have in your life. And it's just a wonderful place. And I kind of do it differently than I did then. And you want different stuff as you get older, obviously, but it's a good thing.
It's like I've likened it to like doing hallucinogenics, where it's like you gotta kind of be like ready mentally to just accept it as like a thing that you're not gonna fully like it's such a big culture shock. I mean, like going to Europe feels so much. It's still different, but it doesn't feel like Japan. I mean, Japan just feels, or like Korea, it feels like so much different than what you're used to.
Well, I'm really interested. I mean, pulling back from Japan for a second, I write a lot about travel, and I think a lot about what we want from travel, and I think that's changed. I mean, it's changed for 100 years, but it's really changed when you're, posting photos about it or watching them, but I when I write or pitching stories or thinking about what people want to read about, it's like, do people want the place that's known as the place? Within the city, within the country. It's not just, but if someone goes to whatever, Milan, and they want to go to exactly the place that is on the, on the agenda, or do they want to go to a place? It's a little bit like falling down the rabbit hole. You almost want to like say like, well, I think after traveling a lot, I have a good feeling about this neighborhood. I'm gonna like keep exploring, and I'm gonna stay on the quieter street and away from the bigger street, and just kind of trust where this takes me. And I kind of think we're moving away from that, or you got to work harder to do it because you've got like, this list of places you're supposed to go, and Google Maps, and 1,000 things, and Instagram, and all the rest of it. And I think we almost have to impose that. I mean, Japan imposes it on you because you just can't. I mean, there's no freaking street signs in half the places. I don't think people realize that. Like, it's
really
crazy.
Hard to get around.
And I think that there's something good about like letting yourself not just get lost, but kind of navigating on, with your kind of your feet under you in a metaphorical way, and not and like finding something for yourself that maybe. Honestly, we're lucky, and it was better that day than you liked it. Maybe it's not for someone else. I mean, it's still nice to find a secret, or a place that you have a connection to that you discovered, and that, that's a nice thing to have. And it seems harder to do because everything sort of feels shared or defined or flicked on or into the system. So you gotta kind of work harder. You gotta get out here to Wisconsin to to get that fish fry. Supper club.
Well, and it's like I think everyone wants those kind of regional feelings of like, what does it feel like to live here for a moment? And I think that's so hard to do. I sometimes almost don't think it's possible. I mean, I lived in Chicago for a very long time, and the best experiences I had were all like, I told Chase this before. We used to do a thing called. We'd made it up as like karaoke roulette. So we would just look up like karaoke places, then reverse order them into the lowest reviewed, and then just go into any random part of the city and just see what it was like. Because it was like that karaoke, it's a specific type of thing. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So you end up at like a brown shag carpeted bar in like Cicero or something, and you're like, oh, this is a different thing. And you always kind of realize it like 45 minutes into the Uber ride, we're like, this is dumb. but you would have these like really memorable, wild experiences, just like giving into like just doing something. And I think that's like when travel is fun, when you stop worrying about like, well, we got to hit this many places, I have to go to this one. It's like, you'll come back, or if you don't, the other thing is you've also, the reason people get excited is because you've seen this shit online, and that's like so many pros and cons to that we could discuss. But really, like, I think a negative sometimes can be like, you've already like had the experience in your head before you went there, so you're only going to get let down unless it's a perfect experience. Now, Japan is a good place for not letting you down, to be fair, but I think that like when you go in just everything could be anything, that's way more fun, and like you have the higher probability of having a great time if you just sort of being like, I don't know, I'd like to have like a couple like cool cups of coffee and a couple good dinners, and then we'll see what happens.
It's a funny thing where you arrive at a place that isn't that you didn't know what it was before, or you just like, we're going into this bar, or we're going into this diner, and then you're with a friend or you're on your own, and you're like, is this place great? I think this place is great. Oh my God. By the end, you're like, this place is great. I didn't know. I didn't this. It's sort of like reading this novel, this Colgate novel, where the next thing I know, I'm like obsessed with this woman who I didn't even know who it was, or you're this band, and it's like, oh my God, this band has some, like, how are they not famous? Or how is this? Or not even how did I not know about them? Or when you come to it in that way, you have this special connection. And I think maybe we're looking for those connections, whether it's film or travel or music or even clothes. And it's like, I think that's a nice discovery. I think when you have that, that's a pretty special thing.
Yeah, it's this like I can't believe I'm going to try to quote this to you, but like if you ever watched The Office, there's this little line in it that's funny to me that Michael Scott is doing the like, do you know how hard it is to get this excited about things? And I think about that all the time, where like it's so like, to want that is like, in my mind, that might be my key to life, of like every movie I watch, I'm like, I hope this levels me when I finish it. I want to get absolutely destroyed in that, I want everything to feel that way. And that's like really hard, because you do get let down, like 75% of the time, but it's all in pursuit of this, like what you're saying is like, you go to this restaurant and you're like, holy shit, I think this might be like insanely good. My
favorite,
and it's like, and that's the best. That's that you discovered it. Whether it's, who cares if someone's like, that's actually a chain in Japan, you're like, I don't fucking care. It was amazing to me. You know what I mean? Like, I loved it.
Well, that's the thing. That's really well said. And I think there is something as you get older that two things. One, you can manage your expectations a little bit better, which is a silly thing to say, but that's like half the times I've gotten a suit made, like there's something wrong with it. These are like serious tailors, like all over the world, really great places. Often there's a fuck up. No one's fault. We fix it, whatever. But it isn't like some flawless, oh my God, no. Or you have a fancy bottle of wine and you're like, I mean, it's fun and it's nice to see this label and all the rest of it, but it's not like that much better than this other thing that I liked or whatever.
Or you just had a bad day before you
had
it.
Exactly, right.
Up,
And but I do think as you get older, like you do put yourself in a position to succeed or discover something better. Like if you having been to Japan a lot and traveled a lot, next, if you go there or anywhere else, you're probably going to like gravitate towards the place that suits you. And that's what you want, even if you're going in, like, I don't know, Barcelona or whatever, and you're like, okay, this place seems too crowded and a little touristic. This seems like this is close to the university. That makes a little more sense. And if you go at a certain time, that you kind of like, you can be intuitive in a way because of all these other things you've discovered going all the way back to the hardcore days.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's what makes like travel or finding new things or anything like that just the best is that if you kind of go into with that attitude of like, yeah, it might not work out, but like if it does, it's going to be the coolest. It's like like weirdly being an optimist when I would say generally I'm pretty negative, but like in this one area of my life, it's like I'm always hoping that it's going to be so much better than it maybe could ever be.
It's a very good. Sometimes I also, if I'm like, this place is like a little, kind of restaurant on a square in this sort of coastal town in France. It's not like the best restaurant. In fact, it's like just good enough. But I love this place. I like being there. I like the feeling when I'm there. I don't get too ambitious with what I order. I just kind of like, there's nothing wrong with maintaining a very specific feeling when you go somewhere. You don't have to do 20 things like you were saying earlier and knock everything off the to-do list.
It's so tricky because when I as I get older and I go back, like if I try to like inventory like, great experiences, great restaurants, for example, because I love like food and stuff, and I go through all these like amazing restaurants I have. When I think about like, like in Alinea or something like that, especially at the height, and you're like, so cool. It was so cool. They did this crazy shit, blah, blah, blah. But you're kind of talking with your brain, not your heart about it. And then when I talk about like the Italian restaurant that we went to every like around Christmas time, that's like a cop bar. It's like, where like cops hang out and order like bad Italian food. That place gives me such a visceral reaction. I'm like, it is the best Italian food I've ever had in my life. And it's not because it's the best. It's because nothing compares to like the feeling of that place. Mm-hmm. Like it can't, I don't think it could be replicated. It just couldn't. I could build a duplicate and it wouldn't be right, Exactly. And like that's the stuff that's like I try to remember when it's like you'll have great experiences and those will be really cool and you'll love to tell those and be like, it was really cool, but you'll never speak about them the same way, at least in my opinion, or I don't, at least speaking for myself. I'd never talk about them the same way as I do about these like random hole in the wall places I ended up or didn't intend to discover, and like those feel like they created
places
like,
you ended up because the other res fell through or a buddy bailed out and you decided to go closer to home.
Yeah.
So, stuff like that. Yeah.
Well, it's also, there's something to be said about what a restaurant, if we're talking about, or a bar evolves into that's beyond the design. It has to do with the people and the ambience and something else and that didn't happen in the boardroom. It probably didn't. It probably even wasn't that way when it opened. It took a while to get to that thing. And that is great. And that I really miss in New York, places that kind of, like Finelli or even Balthazar, that kind of evolved, or even Odeon, that's had kind of different phases of its life or existence. And now, the stakes are so high, the prices are so high, something's got to be good right away. It's almost like the restaurant equivalent of IP, like where they're going, okay, we've got a star chef and this is who's designed. And from the beginning, it's just going to be a scene. And it's like, I want to go to this place after it's been open for 5 years and see how it's like, it's almost like, when you've worn the suit in, right? And it's not, you don't really know what it's like when you wear it out, it when you wore it 20 times. And it's like that, it a little bums me out that we can't it's harder to find, the firemen eating bad Italian food, but because that place evolved because those guys hung out there, that became a thing because whatever, the baseball players or whatever it was, or the band went there. And it's like now that there's not a lot of time in New York, at least, for a place to be good. Like it's got to succeed right away in almost every case. And it's, that makes it less, it makes decision making less good in my feeling.
Yeah, it's like there's either good or bad, and there's nothing in between. Yeah. And quite frankly, I kind of like to live in the in between.
Timothy,
well, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, in between can become like, there are definitely places that you go. It would be like a student cafe kind of, where you're like, there's one in Paris where you're like, it's close to a bunch of like booksellers and like a university, and you're like, this is like something that's nice because people come here and have spent, at all hours and drink coffee and talk too much and analyze the problems of the world. And it's like the food's fine. And you're like, it's kind of like it's sort of like Odeon, in fact, and that, but cheaper. And that's like, it evolved into that. It didn't set out to be that thing. And then it's kind of like got it, whatever, patina or everything else. And I think it's nice when something has the room to evolve and like an album that you come back to and you're like, oh wait, once I thought this was really avant-garde and now it seems very classical.
Yeah. Timbo, we went to Felix in New York. Is that are you familiar?
Of course, yeah, West Broadway, yeah.
I wasn't sure if it's like a.
It was like Chase's first time in New York, and it like had rained really bad in the hotel. So like it was like the only place that we could like go to that was close. And I'm like, you'll still get. It's like an institution. It goes a lot of different ways. You know what I mean? Yeah. But you still get like that, like the old guy that owns it that like will bring out different shit. I mean, you could. It's like you could have. He had a great experience.
Loved
there.
it.
I don't know how to explain to him that you could have a bad experience there too.
No,
but.
It's always funny to me when my friends, like friends from London, guys who, travel a lot, like come to New York, like what they want to do. And like one friend is like, I just want to sit at an old bar, any old bar, and have a Brooklyn lager. I'm like, Brooklyn lager? What? Yeah. You got all this but I'm like, of course, like that's what he has some association with that's very different than what I do. Like I would never drink, but also, so then like, oh, if that's what you want, then I got a whole other list of places, like Nancy Whiskey or something. And he's like, this is amazing. I'm like, oh my God, you're from London. You've got the best pubs, the best bars in the world, and you're kind of hanging out at Nancy Whiskey with, they wanna, or I'll take them to a place where like I don't have to say, there TVs here and a couple. It's not perfect. He's like, no, this is the best. This bar is the best. And I'm like, oh my God. I was like, just don't order any fish here, whatever you do.
Yeah. Well, you're sort of like always matching the experience to something that you think it is. You know what I mean? So it's the same thing in like Japan. You're always like just being like, this is the coolest because Family Mart's kind of the coolest.
It just is.
You know what I mean? Because it looks like it's supposed to look.
The satisfaction I've had from buying a rice ball in 7-Eleven, my sister and I go in there and just like, here's a can of sake. We're having a rice ball. We're walking, with the, kombu in it or whatever, and walking down the street. We're like, Japan. And I'm like, wait, I wouldn't go into a 7-Eleven in America, but obviously it's a whole different setup. But like there's nothing. I enjoy the cans of sweet tea out of the vending machines. It's just like a different thing. So then I realized when I see like Japanese guys at Yankee Stadium just hauling in merch. And I'm like, guys, what are you doing? Like, why are you buying like bags and bags full of like overpriced Yankees merch? And then I was like, if I was at a Tokyo Giants game, I would be going nuts with stuff. 100%. I'd be like, here's the towel, totally. Or here's the beer cooler, or bottle opener, Tokyo Giants. Are you kidding me? Yomiuri Giants. I would be like all over that stuff. So player calendar. Yeah, of course. Like put it in the bathroom,
Timbo, we should, next time we're out there, we should really try to go to a baseball game. That would be the coolest experience. Yeah. It
is you're 100% right though. It's like the kid that was like the foreign exchange student from Colombia. I remember in school, he had American flag everything, and he was like, it rules here. I can watch any movie I want. I can do all these things, and you're like, yeah, fucking America's sick. You're right. Yeah.
You're like, you don't believe how many cable channels. Yeah, I mean, it is funny. Like when I'm somewhere and I'm like, I would a little bit frown. I mean, it's like I Heart New York, coffee mug or whatever, that's like, or the Vian coffee shop. And I'm like, you know what? If this was from whatever, Turin or Reykjavik, I would be kind of into it,
Yeah, it's just a perspective thing. But I think that's the whole reason I think you travel is to change your perspective, or like you should. Do you have any and we don't want to keep you forever.
No,
although I could go forever.
Super enjoying this, I must say.
I always rate a good guest by we write down like a gang of questions before, just like on just so we have like a guidance. And I haven't looked at it once, so we're doing great.
Not even one time.
But I did have one question for you, just because I think you've obviously I'm a big fan of your writing to fan on you a little bit. I think that we discuss style and how you achieve it and what it means and all this stuff a lot on here, but rarely do we have like a proper expert. I'd consider you somewhere in the expert. I'm sure you don't, but we do. So like if you were to say like, because I struggle with sometimes like people writing about style now and saying that like, where has it gone with like the younger generations being so into streetwear and trading online, and it's crazy now. I mean, we say, pros or cons. I came up in a time where I could go to the Hallmark store and buy like a Vogue, and that was about as close as I could get to fashion. Me trying as hard as I was trying, you know what I mean? And that wasn't getting me anywhere close to what I was interested in. And now these kids come in and they're like 13 and know more about Raf Simons than I could ever know. You know what I mean? And you're like, Jesus Christ, had I had this information. So there's all these pros and cons to it. But I still think that like the most trouble people have in fashion is finding their own style. Do you have any advice for like those kids that are like getting into it in a completely different way than you or I would have? Like how could they achieve like finding personal style, or like what do you think the key to that is?
Oh, it's a big question, because I mean, it's funny, like what what I went through would be like when there's just fewer radio stations, or there's just like, like, or you just turned into the college radio station. That's how you discovered music, or, 120 minutes on MTV. And now you've got the whole world. I think, I feel like there's some things that are specific to every era, and then there's some things that are universal to all of our eras. And so there's always going to be this intense discovery when you're starting to express yourself, when you're 13 or 15 or whatever, when you have a little bit of money and you start to care about those things and you're interested in girls or whatever else. And a lot of what you respond to at that age are things that you're obsessed with your own style, and you like things that have a strong expression of their style. So you like, at some point, teenager likes Van Halen or Led Zeppelin, or he likes J.D. Salinger. He likes things that have a very strong point of view, and you like even strong colognes, and you like your senses are overwhelmed in a way that I think teenagers are always going to have. And I think there's nothing wrong. Like, everyone is going to find the band of teenagers, I'm using it as a metaphor for clothes, kind of embarrassing, but was Van Halen less embarrassing? I don't know. I just liked it because that's what I listened to when I was 14. And so I think, I don't have a strong relationship to streetwear, but it's like it's an undeniable expression of what a lot of people care about. And I think that you got to let yourself go through it. You got to, whatever the thing is, if you like Van Halen, if you like these brands, you enter, even if you like these stupid Avengers, whatever, comic book movies, I'm not going to tell these, kids not to do it. You gotta live through it, and then so that's the kind of universal thing. And then you try to allow yourself to also outgrow it. And I think that's, and there's no shame in outgrowing something. I think sometimes we're embarrassed when we look at an old photo of ourselves, but that's everyone. I had a goatee. I wore a Houston Rockets baseball hat backwards, and so you want to kind of trust the things you like, and then also kind of trust yourself to outgrow them. And then at the same time, not be afraid of a little formality, a little bit of tailoring. That every single man looks good in a sport coat, and at some point you're going to have to wear one. So the sooner and this is where the world's a little bit fallen flat. And our magazines, many of that I write for, are not teaching young guys the basic knowledge they need to have about tailoring. And that's too bad. And that's why, honestly, has to do with a lot of, I don't want to say the success of my newsletter, but the viability of my kind of career is helping young guys find, because they're not getting guidance for that. And that's too bad. And I think everybody should have, you shouldn't feel, this is a lot of what we've been talking about today, is you should want to go to the nice restaurant, but feel comfortable in the supper club or the dive or whatever. And similarly with dressing, I think you want to be at your best when you're going to something really important, like a wedding or some family function, or if you're appearing in court or something. And you got it. And you should feel, I don't want to say fluent, but you should feel at ease. And many people, young guys, have never even worn a comfortably fitting sport coat. And no wonder they hate it. And they were never taught. They never got to go to a place that's like, no, that one doesn't fit. Try this, or this one's made better, whatever it is. And so they feel uncomfortable. Then they resist it. Oh, I don't like that. And this weird idea that something should be comfortable the minute you put it on, which in theory, yes, but sometimes it will become more comfortable the more you wear a suit and you'll look better in it. So I think it's good to have your passions, and it's also good to understand the classics in a way that isn't oppressive. It doesn't mean if you wear a coat or a sport coat one day, it doesn't mean you're the man or whatever else. You're just part of a tradition that goes way beyond you and will go on long after us. And so I still I love to see guys dress up, and I think they can do it in their own way too. And you don't let yourself learn something. I mean, there's so many things came to my mind. When you're talking about going into stores when they know you're not going to buy something. When I moved to New York, I would go into Barney's and I would talk to this man. His name was also David, actually. And he's this wonderful man. And he worked at the high level of tailoring. And he knew I wasn't going to buy anything, but I just love to look at the clothes and admire them. And he gave me space to take my time with them and see, and he would tell me about them and he knew that I was obsessed with this stuff, but also I couldn't buy a $2,000 suit at that time. But I would ask him questions. Can I wear brown suede shoes in the summer? He'd be like, not only can you, you should. And be like, brown suede shoes in the summer. And I would ask him about, can I wear a black necktie with if the thing wasn't black, and he's told me all these things. And I was like, and I still see that man. He's still at Pitti. I still see him. He works sometimes for Sartoria, wonderful guy. And I think that we want to like let people. I think when I started writing about this stuff, I was sometimes down on the younger guys. Be like, how do you not know this? How do you not know that? And then I was like, this isn't the way to get anything done. First of all, like, people don't need to spend their time thinking so much about clothes or tailoring or this stuff. They've got other stuff to think about. And it's like me and you who like obsess over it and look at 20 different versions of something. And then I was like, let's bring them in. Like, and guys don't want to feel dumb. They don't want to like look at a wine list and not know what to do. They don't want to feel like, and so then they study so much and know everything about watches or everything about cars or whatever, everything about a band. But it's like, let's bring them in, and it's all right to like start somewhere and get into another place. Anyway, that's my big theory about all this stuff. But I do think it's like, you're not going to find your style about anything, whether it's what kind of writer you are, what kind of musician you are, and even your personal style or how you decorate your home or whatever, until you kind of live through it. And like, that's the natural thing. It's a wonderful thing. And the fact that you look back and how you had your dorm room and you're like, oh God, what was I thinking? Like, of course, like, no, if you went back and looked at how you designed your college dorm room and you're like, oh, it looks amazing. It's like, have you changed since college? It's like having a Reservoir Dogs poster is like the end all be all of what's going on.
Well, it's like, it's so hard because I understand, like, throughout your 20s and stuff, your whole job is just to kind of think about yourself. It's like this 10-year span when like that's pretty much allowed unless circumstances unfortunately have made it difficult. But for the most part, that's sort of your deal, is try to like self-actualize a little bit, understand who you are. And I think if more kids like stopped worrying about what brand was what or what brand was cool and just start being interested and like figure out what they like, that's how you'll develop style a lot faster. Because like I always said, I don't like rules in fashion. I think that's incredibly boring and it should be art, and rules complicate that. Although it's good to know them so you know how to work around them. But I think that like I always had this one rule of like, there's this rock club I hung out in Chicago all the time. It's where I saw shows. It's where I went and had beers with friends and hung out. And I'd never want to be in something, and it's a rock club. You can wear all sorts of different things, but I never want to feel like I didn't want to get clowned on there. You know what I mean? So if you went in one way too far in a direction, you'd kind of get joked around about. And that was kind of always my, like, I wanted to be able to hang with those guys, change my outfits, change who I was as a person, because that's what you have to kind of be okay with that you're going to change. Otherwise, stop being interested in fashion to a certain degree. And it's like, evolve it, let it be different, but keep it inside of, like, worry about going and having experiences and doing things and being out there in the world first. And then the clothes should just complement that and enhance it. It's kind of like good food is the same deal. It's like, let that enhance the experience rather than being the whole experience. I think that's when things get you got a lot hanging on one thing, and then your own. Like, I talk about this guy. I think you'll appreciate this, so I'll say it again. There's this guy that lives like up the road from me. He does not know me. I just see him when I used to walk my dog before he passed, and then when I had a kid, I walked, and I see this guy all the time. He drives a beat Miata that you can tell he digs. And he's like a bigger dude, but still kind of he's got beat up jeans. He's got old loafers that look like they used to be suit loafers. He wears a leather jacket all year round. It's like an A2 bomber. It's beat to shit. And he's got a Smashing Pumpkins Ava Adore, which is also kind of a strange choice of all of them. An Ava Adore shirt. And he's got like a cool beat up hat. And he has a newspaper. He goes in and out. I see him. I don't know what he does, but he's got the most insanely cool vibe and style that I've ever seen. And it's like, whatever he's got, that's what I want. And I think it's just because he's like, I don't think he cares. I'm not saying he doesn't care about the clothes. He's had that jacket for a certain amount of time, but he's put the years into it. This works around his interests and his vibe, not the other way around. Once you can reverse the order, I think that's when it changes.
Well, I mean, if this is a little different than like lessons for the teens or the 20-somethings, but to me, like, the clothes should serve you. And you are the point that they exist. We do not serve brands. We do not serve corporate interests, right? The clothes serve you. And that was the original thinking behind tailoring, even for the wealthiest people in England, which is sort of where this started. And what we're trying to do is have clothes that express some view of how you look at the world, whether you're a creative person or a corporate person, or you want to reassure investors or at the highest levels or some other thing. And then you want them to kind of to fit properly. So then I think those are guidelines of like proportion, color that suit each person, depending on if he's thin or bigger, taller, fair, or whatever. And then you're in a position to do a lot more from that. And I think something strange that happened is like this obsession with brand fidelity, which I don't really get. I mean, I'm older than that, but even like the idea that you'd want to buy everything in an ad is silly to me. And I think it's better to like you can come across whether you're wearing a Smashing Pumpkin shirt or something, but like the clothes should serve your, like if you can get a white Oxford shirt for $60 or $600, it's not always clear what the difference between those things is. And I think many people just go for, oh, well, the price is an indicator or the label is an indicator. Often they're made in the same place. You can, break that stuff down in a lot of different ways. But a person who's confident enough to say like, oh no, this thing is special. I saved money. It was a one jacket I bought this year. I love it. I'm obsessed with it. And then I also know that this just chambray shirt I got on eBay for $20. So you can have those two things together. And when you're in that place with that confidence to do it that way, then the gravitational pull is heading in your direction.
Yeah, that's great advice. David, this has been incredible. It's so much fun. I really like. I never like to do it at the front because you never want to feel this way. But I'm a really big fan of your writing for a long time.
Oh, you're sweet
I
to
really
say
love
that.
what you work on. Yeah, so it was really cool to be able to talk to you. And maybe you'll come on again because we didn't get to a single question. So this was really fun, man. I really appreciate it.
If someone told me we'd have talked Wisconsin supper clubs, Afghan wigs, Tokyo, and Ava Adore, I'm down for it. So there's absolute delight, guys. Really glad to do this, and I'm happy to talk anytime. Stay in touch.
Man.
Awesome.
Really appreciate it, man. You have a good day, and we'll be in touch. If you ever need anything from us, hit us up.
Okay.
Bye, man.
Bye.
Peace.
Bye.
See you.